Straight to the movie. Eddie Mora is a disheveled, unemployed writer. He has a contract to write a book but is more talk than action. He has writer's block. At lunch with his girl Lindy, she gives him his keys back and breaks up, frustrated with his lack of career progress while she has recently been promoted to editor. Walking morosely down a New York street, he bumps into his ex-brother-in-law, Vernon, whom he hasn't seen for 9 years. Vernon is friendly and invites Eddie for a drink. They talk about Melissa, who is living upstate. Eddie confesses he is behind schedule on the book. Vern, currently consulting with a pharmaceutical company, passes Eddie a new brain drug set for market release next year. Vern has to go but leaves his business card. Eddie takes the translucent pill on his way home. In the stairwell he bumps into the landlord's wife, where she rails him about late rent and lack of career. The drug begins to take effect, and Eddie notices things with clarity. He starts talking to the woman confidently about legal studies and, a short time later, they write her law school paper together then have sex. Back in his slovenly apartment, Eddie notices the mess and quickly cleans up. He then gets on his laptop and starts writing. The words fly. The next morning he is back to normal, but he has several hundred pages of his book printed out. He takes them to his editor, who eyes them warily. At his apartment, he checks his voicemail. The editor is anxious to talk. She has read 40 pages and is impressed. Eddie goes to visit Vernon. Vern's face is bloodied but won't say what happened. But he explains the drug is called NZT-48 and asks Eddie to pick up his dry cleaning and some food. For another pill, Eddie will do anything. On return, the door is ajar, Vern is on the sofa, dead, and the apartment ransacked. Eddie, stunned and scared, settles down and calls 911. Waiting for the cops to arrive, he searches for the NZT-48 stash and finds a plastic baggie full of the pills inside the oven, along with a wad of cash and an address book. He hides these from the cops, who eventually release him after a short interview. At the police station, he has a telecon with Melissa, his ex-wife, who doesn't want to see him. Back at home he takes another pill and gets a haircut, new clothes and motivation to finish the book in 4 days. He learns piano, cards, fitness, new languages, and talks like a know-it-all about everything to new friends. One of his listeners, stockbroker Kevin Doyle, gives him his business card. Thereafter, Eddie is invited to a jet-set beach party down south. He zooms around with a babe and a Maserati, then shows off by cliff diving from over 100 feet, revealing that a side effect of NZT is to move ever forward, no holding back. He has an epiphany on what to do for the rest of his life but realizes he needs lots of money to do it. He slowly starts day trading but needs more capital quickly. A cafe owner sets him up with a Russian loan shark, Gennady. The Russian hands him $100,000 but threatens to skin him alive if he doesn't pay it back. Now Eddie stock trades in earnest and rapidly increases his brokerage account to $2 million. Job offers and reporters call. Kevin Doyle offers a meeting with elite entrepreneur Carl Van Loon. At dinner, Lindy is impressed with the new Eddie. They reconnect. Eddie's photo appears in the paper as a mystery trader. A man in a tan coat seems to be spying on them. At night Eddie is nervous, sensing something. Eddie meets corporate raider Carl Van Loon in a restaurant. He jokingly claims medication as his secret, then expounds on his knowledge and hints at a formula based on mass psychology. In a limo, Carl tests Eddie by asking him to review a file of different companies. Eddie gleans there is a major merger in the works. Carl dropped off Eddie in Chinatown and invites him the next day for another meeting. Walking, Eddie loses track of time. Among disjointed events, he recalls Bruce Lee movies to help him battle a gang of muggers in a subway station. He then ends up in a bar and meets new friends and shags a blonde woman. 18 hours later he finds himself back to normal, limping but without memory of recent events. His can of NZT-48 is nearly empty and he can't decipher the corporate files anymore. He calls to beg off the meeting with Carl but Kevin convinces him to attend. Carl asks him about Hank Atwood, a corporate rival who came from nowhere to prominence 2 years ago. But on the TV Eddie notices a news item about the murder of a blonde woman in a hotel the previous day. He excuses himself and vomits outside, fearing he may have killed the girl during his blackout. Fearful of NZT's side effects before taking another pill, Eddie tries to find Vernon's other clients to understand more. But each phone call is a dead end. The next call he makes coincidentally rings the phone of the tancoat tough guy sitting on the other side of a parquet. Eddie realizes the connection first and makes an escape. He meets his ex-wife Melissa in a cafe. She is a strung-out junkie who admits she took NZT, too, but stopped taking it when she realized no one could operate at that level of mental activity without bad consequences. Then found out from Vernon that other users had died. Now off of it for 2 years, she cannot concentrate for more than 10 minutes and her life is a mess. She urges him to taper off slowly as cold turkey kills. She walks away with a pronounced limp. Russian loan shark Gennady finds Eddie and demands his money. In rousting Eddie, he spots a dropped NZT pill and takes it. He feels good and, after getting his $100,000 back, lets Eddie go. Eddie, sick and bedraggled, staggers into Lindy's office. He tells her everything, admits he needs the drugs, and admits hiding his main stash in her house. Leaving Eddie collapsed on the floor of her office, she recovers the plastic bag herself, but in the taxi coming back, the man in the tan coat from the parquet attacks. He viciously kills 2 bystanders that try to help her as she runs off and hides in Central Park. She phones Eddie, who encourages her to take one of the pills. Under its influence, Lindy escapes by using an ice skating girl as a weapon, gashing the face of the tan coat man. Eddie and Lindy sleep together, but in the morning she dresses and is somber. She wants nothing more to do with NZT. Eddie says he needs more time with it to set things up. Lindy leaves him. Once again Gennady meets Eddie, this time wanting more pills. Afterwards, Eddie hires 2 bodyguards. He meets Carl again, looking and acting sharp, and is put in charge of brokering the largest corporate takeover in history. Eddie has figured out the proper dosage to take, remembering to eat and sidestep alcohol to avoid blackouts. He orders up tailored suit with imperceptible compartments to hide his pills, and hires a chemist to reverse engineer the NZT pills in a short 6 months. At a restaurant business lunch, he recognizes a police detective from Vernon's death investigation watching him. The cop shows Eddie the photo of him in the newspaper, which identified him as being at the hotel of the murdered blonde. Eddie hires good lethal lawyer Morris Brandt, who gets him off against weak circumstantial evidence. Meanwhile, the merger goes on and nears its conclusion. Eddie reveals plans to move on, but Carl wants him to stay, acknowledging Eddie's freakability, throwing it around like a trust fund baby, while pointing out he hasn't paid his dues through competition to know how to assess his competition. Finding his hotel room raided, Eddie buys an $8.5 million secure condo fortress. On the street, he meets the Russian again, who wants 20 pills, as he's about to receive $40 million from the Atwood merger. Eddie is confident he'll have enough money to deal with Gennady. At the office, though, Hank Atwood is a no-show. Carl and Eddie meet Hank Atwood's wife, who tells them Hank is in the hospital. The deal will close when he gets better. On the street, he notices Mrs. Atwood's scarred limo driver, the man with the tan coat, and realizes Atwood must be an NZT user as well, who won't get better because he's run out of NZT. For now, Eddie must go to the police station and stand in an ID lineup, but his lawyer, Morris Brandt, gets him released. At the office, Carl is upset. Atwood is in a coma and Carl wants to know where Eddie has been, thinking Eddie knows what is going on and suspecting betrayal. In the washroom, Eddie discovers his pills are missing. A box arrives addressed to him. Eddie grabs the box and exits, leaving a fuming Van Loon behind. Inside the box, the severed hands of his 2 bodyguards. At the condo, Eddie watches TV and sees Mrs. Atwood and her lawyer, who's also his lawyer, Morris Brandt. As he realizes that's where his hidden pills went, he sees the Russians coming for him from the security cameras, who assault his steel door with a chainsaw. Eddie goes to the balcony edge, ready to kill himself rather than succumb to their undoubtedly painful torture. He suddenly remembers where one last NZT pill is and tries to retrieve it but loses it as the Russians break in. Gennady shoots up his own last pill, converted into an injectable form, and begins to prepare Eddie for the slow painful torture he's about to experience. With one final thrust, Eddie manages to turn the tables and kill Gennady. The other 2 Russian thugs, having been busy cracking Eddie's safe with drills, return to the room. Eddie manages to fight them off after lapping up Gennady's NZT-enriched blood, blinding one before killing both in self-defense. At the hospital, Hank Atwood dies. Eddie realizes that, though Brandt stole his pills, he did not give them to Mr. Atwood. Eddie meets the man with the tan coat in the waiting room, who, now that his boss is dead, aids Eddie's search through Brant's safe, where he finds his pills packet while the tan coat man watches over Brant, tied and gagged on the floor. 12 months later, Eddie's book is published, and he's running for the U.S. Senate. He gets a surprise visit from Carl in his campaign office. Though warm at first, Carl hints that he knows how Eddie has done it and has, subsequently, shut down his NZT lab. Carl will guarantee a limitless supply in return for some future inside information. Eddie aggressively comes back. Showing off his abilities, he says he is off NZT and doesn't need it, having become permanently enhanced, and pushes Carl away. At an upscale Chinese restaurant, Eddie and Lindy are together again. He orders his food in fluent Chinese, then notices Lindy's bemused stare. "What?" he asks with feigned humor.